Hey everyone, I hope it's going pretty well for you. So, I wanted to give a follow-up on your chapter on water, talk to you about a couple specific topics related to water, most specifically something called hyponatremia, the impact of alcohol intake on water retention, and really the difference between tap water and spring water that you may buy in a store, or even what we call purified water in a store. So a lot of the book and chapter deals a lot with water already. You remember water is inorganic because it doesn't have any carbon on it, absolutely essential to life. It's a big breakdown of where water is found in the body. So we see, for example, a lot of it contained inside of muscle fluid, muscle material. There's still some intracellular fluid. This is the fluid, inside of cells, and extracellular fluid, which is outside of it. What we'd really see, like for example, interstitial fluid and the blood has a lot of different functions in the body, and I'll let you go through this through the chapter itself. They really do a good job of explaining this. Body temperature regulation is one of the big ones. As far as the ability to perspire, and when that sweat is on the outside of the skin and then it evaporates, that evaporation takes heat away from the body. It's not just the impact of water being outside the body, but the evaporation away from it. It's one of those main reasons why when it's a humid day, you get hotter faster because you're not able to evaporate that water off of the skin very well. It has a big function as a lubricant or shock absorber. So it has a ton of functions in the body, obviously, and without its use, you'll really be impacted. So this sort of material, the book does a good job reviewing. So we're gonna skip over this for now. What I want to focus on more is just to know if you're drinking enough water. So as we can see, there are recommendations for water for men versus women. Women typically 9 cups per day, men 13 cups per day. This number changes quite drastically. Obviously, the overall mass or size of the individual. If you're larger, taller, etc., especially if you exercise or work out more, you're going to need more water in your diet. You lose water through many different ways. We can see we perspire some. We lose a lot by respiring, just through respirations as well, and obviously through urine and fecal matter, we lose it. Here's the thing that you got to keep in mind when it comes to urine color. Urine color is a very important indicator. It's something we always talk about. The classic example is a mechanic. When a mechanic changes spark plugs in a car, the first thing they do when they pull out the spark plugs is they look at them. Because when they look at a spark plug, they can get a look inside what's happening inside that engine. The same thing happens with urine, fecal matter, blood, all these sort of things that come out of our bodies. That's why doctors are always asking for them. Looking at urine, which is something you can do every day, looking at fecal matter, which is something, again, you can do every single day, is a good indication about what's happening inside the body. Is it well hydrated? Does it have some disease? Is there a significant color difference? And those sort of things are things that we should, as individuals, be looking at every single day. We can see the chart here on the left as far as urine color and relation to hydration level. You can see a very clear urine is what you should typically be aiming for. As it yellows, it means that you're becoming more and more dehydrated. The only exception to this is if you take a multivitamin supplement or any sort of vitamin supplement, especially a B vitamin supplement. B vitamins, the same as many vitamin supplements, they're water-based compounds, as you'll learn about later in this, I think module 4 is when we're covering it, but definitely in the class. That will, because it's water-based, it's excreted directly out of the body. As soon as it's taken in, you lose all of it basically right back away. Comes out of the urine and it turns the urine a yellow color. So if in the morning, for example, somebody takes a multivitamin and then they go and urinate, their urine may look yellow simply because all that multivitamin supplement is now being excreted right back out of the body. Didn't do much. Thirst is not a good indicator as far as actual dehydration, and that's because thirst lags behind actual loss of water. This is of great concern for athletes, older adults, and even children. Children typically respond to drinking water when they're thirsty, now that they're becoming dehydrated. So it's always important to remind children, older adults, drink some water. Athletes are typically better at this. There's an old adage, you can tell somebody's an athlete because they'll never walk by a water fountain. It's because they feel the constant urge for water because of a thirst. One of the other big things you got to watch out for is things like swimming. A lot of times when people swim, they don't realize they're becoming dehydrated, but in fact, you're losing a lot of water weight while working out. The same as you would be perspiring or sweating when you're playing basketball. You also perspire or sweat when you're swimming. So again, you lose a lot of weight that way. So again, it's important to hydrate when in the pool doing different activities in the summer. We can tell different things happen with thirst, not just thirsty, but illness can set in, vomiting, diarrhea, fever. All these things will cause major water loss. And it's one of those times, again, especially with vomiting, diarrhea, or fever, where we may want to actually look at an electrolyte supplement. So for example, Gatorade or Powerade, especially maybe a 1-to-1 mixture of the Gatorade with water just to make sure we're getting our electrolyte balance back up, our sodium balance, potassium balance back where it should be with all that loss. So I want to talk to you about a minute about what happens when you ignore the thirst signal. So your book shows this, but I'm only showing this because I want to show you what happens with alcohol. So, as we become dehydrated, different things happen in the brain and the kidneys, and all these different hormones are released, which give us cascades to tell the kidneys retain water. That's really what's going to happen here. One of these chemicals is called ADH, which is antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone basically just tells the kidneys retain water, don't excrete the water to the bladder, which would result in urination. Instead, keep that fluid inside the body, and it helps to maintain fluid balance. So we see that ADH is very important. There's another one called aldosterone on the other side that has to do with more sodium, chloride, etc., and that helps with retention as well. But the one I wanted to focus on is this ADH. So again, as you become dehydrated, ADH is released from the pituitary gland, and as a result, your kidneys then get a signal to retain water. But what happens when we consume alcohol? Alcohol is known as an ADHI, which means antidiuretic hormone inhibitor. And so basically what happens is this. Imagine you have water loss, ADH kicks in, gets to the kidneys, and it causes water balance because it reduces water loss. Well, with alcohol, alcohol blocks the impact of ADH. So ADH is no longer able to interact with the kidneys, which results in increased water loss. That's why a lot of times when people consume alcohol, they have to go to the bathroom more often because alcohol is blocking ADH because it's an antidiuretic hormone inhibitor, and therefore it's increasing water loss. This is one of the reasons why, especially if somebody drinks some alcohol one night, like a couple beers, a couple wines, in the morning they may have a hangover. It could be partially responsible due to thirst or dehydration, in other words, loss of water loss, because again, with dehydration, we can develop a headache. Here's this again. I'd like you to pay really close attention to this in the book. It's important for you. What different amounts of water loss mean to the body, and you can see strong discomfort with a little bit, stronger thirst, less movement, eventually headaches come into play, and eventually can lead to death. Especially once you get to a certain level of dehydration, you can no longer be resistant to heat. So you lose heat intolerance, which means that your heat level just spikes. So you go from that 98 degrees Fahrenheit, and you can be at 103, 104 within 10 minutes, because again, you can no longer have temperature regulation, which is what we started talking about when we started this lecture capture. So where are we going to get our hydration from? How are we going to become hydrated? We can see here, here's the recommendations. The recommendation is get water from water. Don't rely on anything else to bring water to the body. We can see tea or coffee, recommended servings, 0. Everything is 0 except for water. So you can get some water from these different things, yes. Thinking back to what we already learned about drinks like Coca-Cola, etc. Yes, you technically can get some water from those, but it's not considered refreshing. It's not considered hydrating. Water is hydrating. That's where you're supposed to be getting your water from. Same time, too much water can also be a problem. If you take in too much water, you start drinking a lot of it, it can lead to something called water toxicity, which is called hyponatremia. It can kill you because basically what happens here, it flushes out all the electrolytes from your kidneys. So you lose sodium, you lose chloride, you can't regulate your body properly, and it can lead to death. Here's some examples of that. A long time ago, back in the 90s, with fraternities, they used to do hazing, and hazing activities used to involve a lot of alcohol, you had to drink a lot of beer. That got changed over the years, and some fraternities instead made people start to drink a lot of water instead. But again, water can be just as dangerous because it can lead to hyponatremia. So there were instances where certain fraternity brothers or pledges died because they drank too much water in too short of a period of time, and it led to their death because, again, it was not just water imbalance, but an electrolyte imbalance in the body. Can also happen with long-distance athletes. So thinking back to if you are going to be doing long-distance events or you know somebody, it's important that when you're exercising for more than an hour and you're doing a high activity like long-distance running, and we're going to talk about this in the next lecture capture, if you're only drinking water, you're flushing out electrolytes. So again, it's one of these cases where you start flushing out electrolytes because you're running for 2 or 3 hours, it can lead to hyponatremia. It's one of those instances, again, where something like Gatorade or Powerade may become important because those help to recover electrolytes in the body. So the last thing I want to talk about with water is just where our water supply comes from. There's all these different terms out there nowadays, and there's a big push by advertisers because, again, you're a consumer. They want you to consume spring water or purified water or bottled water, they're saying it's better for you. Is any of that really true? Well, it turns out no, that's not true at all. And so we're going to have a few minutes here to talk about our water supply and tap water versus bottled water and what it really means. And what I hope you walked away from this lecture is the idea that tap water is extremely safe, extremely clean, gives you the exact same benefits, much more cost effective, and even more so, it's not damaging our environment because all this bottled water is adding a lot of plastics to the planet. And also just think about moving water on a highway, all the gasoline, all the oil we're using for that bottled water. So anyway, here's what we know about tap water. Tap water falls underneath the Safe Water Drinking Act. Safe Water Drinking Act means we need to monitor all municipal water supplies. So your town, wherever you live, and the reflection essay you're going to be working on after this video lecture is going to show you Austining. So Austining is in Westchester County. And I'm going to have you look at what their water supply says because it's regulated, it's monitored every single year. In fact, if you're a resident of a town, they have to send you the results of the water monitoring system, and they can't let it go bad. That's the whole thing. If something is off, if trihalomethanes are off or trichloromethanes are off, they need to let you know that, and then they need to try to remediate that problem as well. Because of this, the U.S. water supply is one of the safest water supplies in the world. Typically, what it comes down to, the reason people don't like tap water, is it comes under what we call the A category of water taste, and that is aesthetics. People don't like the way that chlorine tastes, and so when you drink tap water, you actually can taste that chlorine. So that's the thing that people don't like about tap water. Truly clear or pure water should have zero taste. That's the idea. And so, again, if you want that sort of a thing where it's just more aesthetic than anything else because water is safe, this is where we recommend you get what we call an aesthetic filter. So this could be a Brita water filter, a pure water filter, all those ones they put, for example, the jars you buy or the what do you call it, like a pitcher that you would buy, and they have that little filter you drop in it. Those are aesthetic filters. They don't do anything except remove the chlorine and make the water taste better. That's perfect. That's what anybody drinking municipal water supply in New York State needs. They don't need anything else. That's more than good enough. You can also do something else. You could pour the water and then leave it out overnight. The chlorine in the water will off gas, so it will just go into the atmosphere. It'll be lost. And then in the morning, it'll taste like pure water. It will taste no different for you. So the tap water is an excellent resource. It's in your tap. You don't have to go anywhere to get it. It takes no gasoline to get to your house because it's just moving by the natural flow of water, the same as the Romans did 2,000 years ago. And, it's monitored to make sure that there's nothing hazardous there for you. Now, let's talk about bottled water. Turns out people are consuming around 30 gallons of bottled water per year. That's 9.4 billion bottles in total. That's a lot. In general, people have the belief that bottled water is safer than public drinking water, but it's just not true. And what it really comes down to is that bottled water and tap water are going to be similarly regulated by the FDA and the EPA. There's different definitions for them, artesian, etc., flowing artesian, water table, or well water. And we can see here there's a little graph that shows you what these different things mean and where the water supply is really coming from. But really the only thing that we're really going to see here as far as the difference between bottled water and tap water is the taste itself. Since tap water is chlorine treated, you get that chlorine taste. Spring water may be ozone treated, and ozone is an oxygen containing chemical. So again, it gives a different taste and flavor. Taste what we call more pure, and so people like it, and that might be why people are going more towards it. But what you have to keep in mind also, when they use the word pure, it's an advertising term. Pure is not a legal definition in any sense. It means nothing about the water. It's just something thrown onto a bottle to help you consume it. Because remember, again, even with water, when it comes in a bottled form, you are automatically a consumer. It's much more expensive than tap water. Bottled water costs me about $1,500 a year. That's a lot of money. The same amount of tap water is 50 cents. So again, you can save a lot of money by shifting away from bottled water back to tap water. And here's the big thing as well. And this goes back to what we learned a little bit in Module 1. Most bottled water is actually just filtered tap water coming out of California, coming out of Chicago. Dasani, Aquafina, Vitamin Water, Smart Water, these are all tap waters. It's literally tap water. It's just maybe they ran through almost like a pure filter or a Brita filter to make it taste better, but it's tap water. But the problem is now you've consumed tap water that was bottled in California or Chicago, taking water from an area that's not your own, so you've moved a water table. In addition, has to go on a highway or a train to New York State. That means, again, it takes coal or oil to get it here. So we're now consuming oil to move that product. And there's another big part of this a lot of times, especially with spring water. Now, spring water is a product, and it comes from a spring when it says that, but spring water doesn't contain fluoride. And fluoride in our water supply is one of the most important things we've been able to add because it's very important for bone health and teeth health. Here's what we know about water. We usually call it blue gold. It's changing the water tables in many environments because we're moving water. It used to be that you consumed water in one area, and then because of urination or excretion, you're putting that water back to the same area. But since we're moving water now, I mean, Fiji water comes from Fiji. You can buy water from Iceland. We're changing water tables and consuming oil to do this process. It's very, very important. I'm going to show you what happens with this. So here's where our water supply comes from. So we're down here. This is, Westchester County area right here. And our water supply is coming from watersheds. So you can see there's rain catchments, and there are major, major tunnels they've been building to allow this watershed to come all the way down and service New York City, service Westchester County, etc. Very important water supply. This is very clean water supply as well. If you ever go into these areas, you'll see that, you drive an hour and a half upstate, and it says, do not enter New York City water supply, and that's why this is. But here's what happens when you move water from areas that aren't your own. When you move water from areas that aren't your own, first of all, we have this whole idea here where we're consuming lots of bottles of water. What do the bottles do afterwards? Nothing. They're discarded. We'd hope that most of them go for recycling, but it turns out they don't. I'll show you a graphic on that in a minute. And the big thing also is we're impacting people's lives. When we take water from an area, for example, Poland Spring, we're stealing water from Maine. All right, that's what that means. It's Maine's water, and it's now being sold to us for our consumption. They don't get that water back then. And so what people have started to do is protest these things. No bottled water, human right. My water is not for sale, water for life. And what do we do when we upset water tables like this? Well, we see this impact here on the bottom. Along with climate change and everything else, it's parching the soil. When the water is removed from an area, the water table doesn't always recover, especially a Great Lake, which were formed by the glaciers. So once that water is gone, it's gone, folks. It doesn't come back. And unfortunately, as we can see here, look at this. Now, one of the things is with bottled water, they're using polyethylene nowadays, so it's a little bit lighter than what they used to use for their bottles of water. The phthalates, that part, that's what makes the plastic sort of less rigid. But at the same time, phthalates are dangerous for your health. That's also going to be found in your bottles of plastic bottles of water. But look at the recycling rates. It was for a while that we were recycling pretty well. About 40% of bottles are being recycled, but now we're about 25%. That means only 1 out of 4 bottles of water makes its way to a recycling plant. 3 of them make themselves way into a dump, or even worse, into the ocean. And so I'm not going to go through the Great Pacific Garbage Patch here, but I recommend highly you look up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is a huge problem. It's not going away, and it's being caused by things like plastic bottles. Okay, so again, when we consume these things, we get more of them. They make more of them because we're consumers and they want to give us the products we want. But we can stop that process by getting rid of plastic bottles. We prevent things like this. Look at all these plastics. Because plastics are dense and because they're shiny, a lot of times pelicans or birds that catch a seafarer, they see the shininess, they think that it's an animal, and they go and try to capture it. So this is the carcass of the pelican, and you see that it consumes so many plastics over its lifetime. Thinking that it was consuming fish, it could have killed the animal. We can see here a 6-pack container got around a seal. So when the seal was a baby, the 6-pack container ring got caught around its neck, but then it's continued to grow, and you can see it's actually going to strangulate the seal. And look at all these plastics being caught on the waterfront. So it's a big problem. These are things that we can deal with and that we have to deal with our generation because, this is what we usually call the sins of our fathers, where it gets passed from one generation to the next. We can be the people to stop this by making the choice not to consume plastics and plastic bottles in this way. So here's what we can do instead with water bottles. Okay, so we can use tap water. We know that. Stainless steel bottles are best. Glass is also good. There are plenty of options now on different websites or supermarkets where you can buy these products and they're very good. If you're going to buy a plastic container, look for recycling codes 2 and 4. Avoid plastic bottles with recycle codes 3 and 7. Anything that doesn't say BPA free. If it doesn't say BPA free, don't buy it because again, it's going to leach over to the water, and then you're going to be consuming different things that are bad for you. In this case, BPA. It looks like a human hormone, so it can actually impact your health. When you buy a bottle, buy one with a wide mouth because it's easier to clean than a narrow mouth. Plastic bottles, if they get scratched or cracked, throw them away. Most of those are single use. You know, when we reuse these plastic bottles of water, it actually impacts our health because it causes more leaching of things like BPA and the phthalates to our water, and then we're drinking it. And never store containers of water in cars. In a hot car, it causes that leaching effect again, and those chemicals are going to get passed over to you. Instead, it's time to recycle that bottle. And I'm talking about plastic bottles here. Some people think that chilling or freezing plastic bottles of water is also dangerous. In fact, that's not that big of a deal because, again, with heat, it allows those chemicals to diffuse into your water, but with the cold, it actually keeps the chemicals away. So it's not as bad as people think it is. So in case, that's really it for this first part with water. In the next segment, there is going to be a reflection part here, and there's going to be a reflection as far as ergogenic aids and vitamin supply. So now you've seen this video lecture, you can move on to the rest of the chapter and the module. Thanks everyone for your time.